Osmoregulation refers to the regulation of body fluid solute concentrations. Solute concentrations are measured in osmolarity, usually milliosmoles per liter, which is the number of osmoles within a liter of solution. Now remember that an osmol refers to the individual ions within a solution. For example, a solution of 1 millimole per liter of a salt like sodium chloride, which can split apart in water to become a sodium ion and a chloride ion, will have both those ions contribute to the osmolarity. So 1 millimole per liter of sodium chloride is 2 milliosmoles per liter. In a normal body, blood plasma osmolarity is very tightly regulated and kept at around 290 to 300 milliosmoles per liter. The main components of this osmolarity is made up of ions like sodium, as well as glucose and urea. To get the actual osmolarity of the body, a calculation like this one can be used. 2 times the concentration of sodium ions, plus the concentration of blood urea nitrogen divided by 2.8, where the concentration of glucose and the concentration of blood urea nitrogen are measured in milligrams per deciliter. Both glucose and blood urea nitrogen can be converted from milligrams per deciliter to milliosmoles per liter by dividing them by 18 and 2.8, respectively. Now let's say it's a super sunny day out and you forget to bring your water with you. Well, first, as you walk around, you're constantly losing water through sweat, as well as water vapor from your mouth and nose as you breathe out, and those are insensible water losses. Without drinking water, you can quickly get dehydrated. This causes your plasma osmolarity to increase, because the fluid levels in your blood drop, but the total number of solute particles remains about the same. 2 things now start to happen simultaneously. First, a region in the brain called the anterior hypothalamus has a cluster of neurons called supraoptic nuclei, which have osmoreceptors that sense even tiny changes in osmolarity, as small as 1 milliosmole per liter. These neurons are always sampling the blood that passes by. With increases in plasma osmolarity, water will flow out of the cell and cause it to contract. Increases in osmolarity past the normal set point of 290 to 300 milliosmoles per liter stimulates the hypothalamus to produce antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, also called vasopressin. Second, as the blood volume drops, so does the blood pressure. Specialized neurons called baroreceptors act as pressure sensors in the walls of the cardiovascular system, in a few specific areas. They're in the posterior wall of the right atria of the heart, in the aortic arch, and in the right and left carotid sinuses, which is where the common carotid splits to become the internal and external carotid. These baroreceptors detect tiny changes in how stretched out those walls are. So if blood volume decreases and there's less stretch on those walls, the baroreceptors change their rate of firing a signal up to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus senses the change and starts making more antidiuretic hormone. So ultimately, both an increase in osmolarity and a decrease in pressure leads to more ADH. Antidiuretic hormone is a peptide hormone, which is a small protein that cells use to communicate with each other. ADH is made within the cell bodies of supraoptic neurons, and then gets packaged into vesicles and gets secreted down long axons which extend into a synaptic cleft in the posterior pituitary. The ADH gets released into the interstitial fluid, moves through nearby endothelial cells, and gets into the capillary bed of the posterior pituitary gland. From there, the ADH travels throughout the body and binds to receptors in its 2 main target tissues, the collecting ducts of the kidneys and the smooth muscle that wraps around arterial walls. Now, starting with the kidney, the functional unit of the kidney is the nephron, and the collecting ducts connect those nephrons to the minor calyx of the kidney. This collecting duct part is normally impermeable to water and urea. ADH acts on the principal cells that are found along the collecting ducts. These cells have 2 sides, the apical or luminal side, also known as the side in contact with the tubular fluid, and the basolateral or interstitial side, the side that's in contact with the interstitium of the kidney. ADH travels through the paratubular capillaries of the kidneys and binds to V2 receptors on the basolateral membrane of the principal cell. Once the V2 receptors are bound, the principal cells incorporate water protein channels called aquaporins in the luminal membrane of the cell. Because the solute concentration of the interstitium is high, water flows via osmosis from the lumen of the tubule down its concentration gradient, into the interstitium. From there, water can also freely enter the paratubular capillaries so that it can be reabsorbed back into the systemic circulation. More water in the systemic circulation decreases plasma osmolarity. Now looking at those smooth muscles in the walls of the blood vessels, ADH also causes them to contract. As the diameter of the blood vessel lumen decreases, the blood pressure will increase. If we look at the relationship between radius of a tube and the resistance, we know that resistance is proportional to 1 over the radius to the 4th power. And because pressure, or delta P, equals resistance times flow, a decrease in the radius will cause an increase in the pressure. As the osmolarity normalizes and blood pressure rises, both osmoreceptors and baroreceptors stop stimulating the anterior hypothalamus, and as a result, less ADH is secreted. So now let's consider a different situation. Let's say that you start drinking a lot of water, way more than what you usually drink. That extra fluid diffuses through the large intestines and gets into the blood and decreases the plasma osmolarity. This decrease in plasma osmolarity inhibits osmoreceptor firing from the hypothalamus, which inhibits ADH secretion. As less ADH reaches the kidney, aquaporin protein channels don't get incorporated into the apical surface of the principal cells, and water reabsorption can't happen. As more water is excreted in the urine, you end up going to the bathroom a lot more. As that water gets removed in the urine, plasma osmolarity increases back to normal. A second thing that happens, which happens sort of at the same time as the first, that increased amount of fluid increases plasma volume, which stretches the walls of the blood vessels. And baroreceptors sense that stretch and also cause the hypothalamus to stop ADH secretion. Without ADH, smooth muscles relax, and that results in the radius increasing and the resistance decreasing, and therefore there's a drop in the blood pressure. So ADH inhibition causes both the removal of excess water and the relaxation of blood vessels, which work together to help return blood osmolarity and volume back to normal. Alright, as a quick recap. Osmolarity of blood plasma in the body is normally kept around 290 to 300 milliosmoles per liter, and is tightly controlled by ADH. With ADH secretion, the kidney increases reabsorption of water back into the circulation and causes vasoconstrictions to bring up the blood pressure. Both pathways are controlled by negative feedback loops which inhibit further secretion of antidiuretic hormone.